And welcome to the ESL quarterfinal of EUDC 2020. My name is Ayal, I'll be your chair. With me on the panel are Alexander, Emily, Linsey, and Lovro. I will now go through the teams, asking each to give me their speaking order and if they wish to state their pronoun introductions as well. And congratulations again to all teams for making it this far. In opening government, we have Sofia A, who's speaking first.
Roman speaking first, Nikolai speaking second. We have no preferences.
Okay. In opening opposition, we have Streitkultur A, who's speaking first.
Marius first, Samuel second here today.
Okay. In closing government, we have Leiden B, who's speaking first.
Ul speaking first, no preference.
Romay speaking second, she or they, please.
Okay, and in closing opposition, we have OpenU A, who's speaking first.
David speaking first, here it is fine.
Okay.
Daniel speaking second, he please.
Okay. So without further ado, I'm happy to call upon the Prime Minister to begin the debate.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Let's just talk a little about the framing, the context behind this, because I think it's very, very important to get this in the way. Most likely, the children who probably have been stolen are not babies and are not like older children who are like 10, 11, 12. For simple reasons. Babies are like hard for you to literally take care of because they have to be close to the family, and older children are harder to indoctrinate and have biggest probability of them, for example, running away, staging revolt, for example, harder for you to train them, etc. Most probable children who, for example, probably would have been stolen are, for example, from the ages of like 3 to 5. These are like the children who are like physically easiest like to steal other than babies, but and at the same time have it sounds bad, but best ratio for like stealing and like managing. And secondly, like easiest to indoctrinate because they don't have like the precise memories of what exactly their parents are. Their cognitive abilities haven't been developed yet, and they have like less probability, for example, to oppose certain authorities that are like told to them. So like these are most likely the people who have been stolen. Secondly, we think that like the junta most probably had, since they had control basically of Argentina, they had like strategic ability to distribute these people all across the country. So like because it's a smart, it sounds bad, I know, but it's a smart decision for you to like literally take the children to the other part of the country so that you have minimal risk of parents like either finding them or like trying to search for them or like etc. They most probably have done this in like the most strategic and precise way. What are like the examples of them using these children? Probably for maintenance work there, for example, washing stuff, like for example, cleaning weapons, like these sort of things. And probably some of the children who have been like sold like tendency to be part of the junta would probably like receive some kind of training, etc. But we think like most cases, most capital and power went to like the top members of the junta or like the people who are mostly associated with the junta. So you have this divide. This is generally the framing which this debate is supposed to be on. What is our model? So like one, we're going to force this test on like if we can like all of the population from this bracket. We're probably going to start with the people which we have biggest probability for which we know that are probably been part of the junta, so state is likely to investigate this. 2, we're going to like tell the parents who exactly the person is he or she alive, etc. But also we think that, for example, state can mediate the relationship between these people to some extent. So for example, if the child doesn't necessarily want to meet the parents, they can say, by the way, the child didn't necessarily want you, but we will take the burden of like the parents having the information, also relatives like brothers and sisters, etc. This is the models we stand in this debate. Any clarification? No, great. So like, what are we going to bring to you? Sure, go. Oh.
What if somebody resists? Do you send the police and the military to tear them in and to the
Sure, of course we have to take this burden. So like similar to vaccination, if you resist, the repercussion abilities to you. Similar, if you don't pay taxes, police officer comes, we're going to take this burden in this debate. We have no other choice, we're OG. So like, what are we going to prove to you in this debate? We think that basically the big harm was created on the parents and on the relatives of these individuals. And the only just way for you to restore this harm to some extent is by revealing to you this information. So what is the harm that was dealt to the parents? We think that the harm was dealt to the parents is very disproportional. Why? Notice that human beings and human like individuals in a sense very much care to the idea of being parents, very much care to the idea of having a child. Firstly, because of biological reasons, you are wired to like disproportionately take care of the child. This is like, for example, every time something bad may happen to it, you're like very emotional and you like very much want to take care of the child. Secondly, because child is a reflection of you. So for example, you can like put emphasis of things that, for example, you didn't manage to do in your life, and you can like basically mold child in a way so that you can make sure it has better chance of life. So for example, if you're poor, you like to make sure child becomes like not poor, etc. Also generally wanting to like have better life for them. And thirdly, you want to have good relationship with the child. So when child grows up and it has grandchildren, you want to be able to communicate with them, become a grandfather, grandmother, etc. We think this was taken from these individuals by an illegitimate force, and this capability was stolen from them because the child was taken. What are the harms that are likely to happen? Firstly, none of the things that I explained are now possible because you have no capabilities of doing this. But secondly, we think that this effect is disproportional, because if it happens once, you're likely to fear, for example, this happening to future children. So for example, you're likely to either not have children, which takes away your agency because of fear, because you're afraid that maybe your child may be taken by this thing, or like generally be extremely overprotective if you have current child so that they don't get stolen and you don't do these things. So it limits their agency and capacity as a human being. You're likely to skew the choice of these individuals. But thirdly, more practically, we think that it's likely for like the parents to have like disproportionate effect after child was taken. So paranoia kicking in, you not knowing if child is dead or alive, for example, you not knowing where exactly child is, what is happening to them, etc. Which is like something that is very hard for individual to control over the time. And if op contest, you can get over it. No, you can't, because this is one of the most important things in life. So why do we think this is likely to like create closure to some extent for the parents? Firstly, just the sheer information of you knowing that your child is alive and out there is in a closure of itself, because you no longer hypothesize if the child itself has like died, if the child itself has like had these problems. So we think that this is a closure. But why only this can give you this information? We tell you that other means simply do not work. You cannot restore this agency through other ways. So this is the only way for you to restore this agency, by this particular mechanism. But also secondly, we think that it creates the ability and capability, for example, for like more extensive communication with them. So for example, we see maybe some children would not want to see their parents because they've never met them, but maybe some of them will. And maybe some of them will have communication with each other. So when this communication happens, you're likely to like learn things that have happened throughout the life of the individuals. Like Op can contest this, but say, but what if the child has done problematic things? We tell you on the comparative, it is better, because you no longer speculate. You no longer wonder what exactly is going to happen. It's better for you to have the information and take it upon you, etc. But secondly, you have an ability to reconnect with them, and not only the parents, but also like the brothers and sisters, to like understand what exactly is this individual, what is he, what he or she has lived through, what are the extent of the life that they have had, etc. This is extremely beneficial, because it's at least some layer of happiness you're able to restore to these people, some level of like ability for you like to connect with these people, to have positive experience with them. For example, having dinner together, or like generally talking, or understand if they, for example, have a wife or a husband, or all these things. But even if it's the bad stuff, we tell you that bad stuff is also part of the equation, which you lose out on their side of the house. This is the only way you're going to get this net benefit. We think this is the most important thing in this debate, because the people have been disproportionately harmed. For all these reasons, vote OG.
I thank the Prime Minister for that speech, and I'm happy to call upon the Leader of Opposition.
we in opening opposition think that if you force someone to face their past, which has been 40 years ago or something, they have to revisit massive trauma, which hurts them, which disrupts their current life, which disrupts their family. It disrupts the parents. It's just really, really bad. Before I get into our counterprop, I would want to just point out one tension that I think is in the opening government case. They think there is a right of the parents to know their grandchildren, but they also make it in a way that says the individuals who are being tested are allowed to choose whether their parents will know. If the grandparents have a specific right, okay, maybe if I misunderstand you, please clarify in DPM. Sorry for that then. Okay, counterprop. We think there's two ways in which you can make this, which mitigates most of the harms. Number one, you can prop it voluntarily. You can just say, if this is something important for you, you can go to the state, the state can, in our world, also pay for these DNA tests. If it is also about money claims, so for example, maybe you want to pay reparations to them, people who want to know this or who want to get the reparations from the government, they can easily go there if they voluntarily choose so. We think this is nothing you should force upon people. Secondly, it could also additionally be done anonymously. That means if it's, for example, if you want to know the scale of the problem, if that is your concern in government, we think it can also be done anonymously so that people choose to go there but not reveal the identity to themselves or to their parents or to anyone but the state. So it's essentially just one tick in the book. A lot of the results that you're claiming are not necessary, like you don't need to force them to necessarily do this. The consequence of this for the debate is that the only difference is the people who don't want this. And we think that there are many people who do not want this, who you forcibly drag to your lab and test them. And we think this is the biggest problem in your case, because you need to show that forcing all of them heals it, even if they chose not to want this decision. And I think this is something that is very, very hard to show from opening government. Okay, let's get into our constructive. We think this will revisit massive trauma for a lot of people. I think this has been a terrible chapter in most people's lives. The parents have, I'll take you in a second. The parents have been taken away with their children, which is obviously something that is bad for them, but also the children have probably been grown up in a situation where they didn't know their real parents, they were maybe in foster homes, maybe they were given into other families, we actually don't know. But probably their childhood wasn't as perfect as many of ours. And therefore, these children probably would rather have to closed the chapter within their life's book, especially under the characterization that we give. Maybe some people want to know. They can voluntarily choose. What you have to defend is the people who actively don't want, those who resist. And we think that especially given that the reactions to trauma and past life and historic events are deeply individual, they vary massively between different individuals, we think that it is completely fine for some people to have closed this chapter entirely within their life. We think there are three harms that happen if you force them anyway. Number one, you disrupt their current life entirely, especially given under the framing of opening government. They have probably been brought up in completely different social circumstances in a different part of Argentina, which is a huge country, therefore probably also has other cultural backgrounds. They have been grown into a completely new family. Maybe they have children of their own, they have a wife, etc. Now you force them to know that there's someone else at the other side of the country who is their true parent. What are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to move back with their entire family? It's really something that they have to deal with all the time, which massively disrupts them. Maybe they will decide to move, but maybe their wife doesn't want to move, etc., etc. It's just a massive nail in their heart. Secondly, all of these things can be sensationalized. That might be that you have local media who say, well, this is the person who comes from these disruptive parents, whatever, and rumors are spreading around within your new neighborhood. That means it is more likely that you will be looked at in strange ways when you go to the supermarket, and etc. Thirdly, some people might distance, especially from you, especially older people are more likely to actually think, maybe if they have been loyal to the government in the past, most of these older people might think that you are actually some kind of weirdo because you have been of these parents. Maybe there were some weird stories floating around, and therefore you will probably have it harder in your life now. You have suffered in the past, but you can close this chapter if you want to. CG, please.
Okay, so just to be on the same page, for your case to be meaningful, there need to be quite a lot of kids who would prefer not to be tested. Am I correct?
Yes, correct. And we say that a lot of people would not want to know who their parents are. They do not want to revisit the trauma because it is something that, because of all the reasons I just give you, they are scared that this is something, or they just don't want to know. I mean, lots of people don't want to know their parents. Also, if they come from a sperm donation, for example. Secondly, the parents. I mean, depending on how I understand the opening government's MEC, the parents might or might not know whether they now have children, who the children are. Often they have chosen a new life, or they have come over this and have chosen a new life. They maybe want to forget the past and the traumatic events. Now they have to relive the trauma. They have to decide between maybe a new family that they have and an old family. It's not like it's just a really happy reunion. It's just someone new, and you maybe don't know what to do with that person. You can't connect to them because they're from different cultural backgrounds. We also think that the child should be prioritized over the parents' right to know, because the child never consented to be born. Therefore, they should have the agency to choose whether they want to know their parents, and not the parents whether they know the child. Lastly, a principle. We think you have principally a right to choose which parts of your individual identity you want to know. That means, for example, you can choose to not know your genetic diseases, and many people choose not to want to know. They don't go to 23andMe and ask them because they don't want to, and we think they have a principal right. Even if it would make utilitarian sense for the government to test everyone because it would decrease the probability of certain genetic diseases spreading, we think that you as an individual have a right to choose which kind of part of your past and future or identity you want to know. At the end of the day, you have some amount of people who don't want this. And these people will have to revisit the trauma a lot. We think there's a principle and practical harms of this. Please oppose.
I thank the Leader of Opposition, and I'm happy to call upon the Deputy Prime Minister.
Hi, I am audible, I assume?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Just one quick second. Okay. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, just a clarification on our added benefit in the model. I think it only what we meant, and I think the Truman explained it fairly well, is that in certain cases, when you're able to mediate between both of those, you're able to give that information to the parents. So now the parents, when they know who that person is, etc., they also have the added ability of knowing whether he actually wants to meet them. So it's up to them then to decide whether they still want to approach him or not. I think it just mitigates some of the more extreme scenarios in which the parents can still like decide, okay, well, I'm fine now. I know who this person is. I know how he developed. I just wanted to know that. I don't need to meet him if he doesn't want to. Or maybe when they approach him, they're going to be a bit more cautious in terms of how they communicate with them, etc., etc. I think these are some minor other benefits in how our model especially works. I think that what they basically tell you is basically revisit massive trauma point. I think that this is fairly symmetrical point because firstly the parents aren't the perpetrators, so mostly basically where the trauma comes from is that experience, what actually happened to them, the people who maybe beat them, or the military junta who are abusive to them, etc., etc. I don't really understand. I think that like some normal parents knocking on your door who are probably not even part of the military, etc., etc., isn't necessarily something that is going to bring out memories on the comparative. I think that also like this person is probably around 44 years old, so like he has a lot of time to think about this, and I think it's important to also understand understand that he knows he's a stolen child. I mean, most of these kids are probably displaced in some places. They have been indoctrinated. They have been used in certain situations where like they had to fight for the junta, etc., etc. But the junta never really like they took them from one place and secretly put them in another family. They were probably living in spaces where they know, and they were wondering how all their life also who exactly is their parent. I think that if on the comparative photo, it's important to understand that I think that there are multiple people who would actually want to meet their family. Because look, even if we buy their analysis, these are damaged people, and we see that in some cases they probably are going to be those. I think that those people are even less likely to create a family on their own. I think on the comparative, they have the capacity to do so compared to this capacity which doesn't exist on the sides of the parents. But in many of the cases, they might not be able to because they have that trauma, because they have lacking communication skills, etc., etc. So I think that there's multiple cases in which actually they want to meet their only family. And I don't personally understand why, if you have an established family and you're doing well, why this person meet you means that you now have to choose between one family or the other. I think that what we prove to you is that we restore a little bit of the obligation that we have to these parents or families of this child, to the point in which they're able to at least know this information and have the capacity to talk with that person. Maybe if they like each other, they can create a certain kind of relationship. Maybe that relationship will be close, maybe not that close. Maybe they'll meet once a month, or maybe they'll meet for certain birthdays, etc., etc. I think that there's nuances to this, so it's not like that big of a deal. I think that also like this, they say that, oh, this is only about the people who don't want this. I think I already give you a couple of examples where this is not actually the case, and in certain cases they actually would want to meet them. I think that some people actually just have no idea who their parent is, because, for example, as Roman explained to you, they maybe are put in a completely different part of Argentina. So I think that on the comparative, I think what's going to happen in most of these cases is parents, through some way, or family or brother, track this person down, and now they go to the government and say, basically they have the ability to go to the government and say, please, let's have a DNA test, if they actually don't want to. In these particular situations, I think that's important to restore that agency. If the person still doesn't want to communicate with them, even after they have proven him that they're basically his parents, I think that this is fair and is not going to be that damaging to the child themselves. I think that, yeah, I'll take a question actually from CO.
Assuming there is some benefit to the parents, why it's still legitimate to force it upon the child, assuming there is also some damage to the child?
Yeah, so this is basically what we explained to you in terms of like the vaccine comparison. I think that our society is about balancing rights. So at the moment in which we give you multiple reasons as to why these people have been harmed, and they have the right to know this, to have this information, comparatively to the harm that this person is going to inflict on himself, which we believe is fairly minimal, and he still has the ability, like he or she is a 44-year-old person who has the complete abilities to, like, I don't know, tell to these people, don't bother me, or even in some extreme cases, even get a restraining order, etc., etc. I don't think like this person can be like so heavily damaged. They're probably taught a lot about this, and they're mentally prepared basically for this, etc., etc. I think that in multiple scenarios, we actually when there's bigger harm to certain groups in society, we privilege that over certain rights of individuals, such as vaccines, such as conscription, such as taxation, etc., etc. In all of those cases, what we say is that yes, you're a person, you have those individual rights, but in particular situations, you also owe to help certain groups of society or society as a whole, because society is giving you security, it has allowed you to exist, etc., etc. They also give you this child was never consented to be born. I mean, if that's the case, like, why don't we just take every child from every parent and basically allow them to choose whether they want to meet their parents? This is completely uncomparative in this debate. And in terms of the right to information, they never really engage with our analysis in terms of the reasons why you have the right to that information and why basically this has harmed your capacity to create a family, to feel better after this, to reconciliate, which is some things that we acknowledge as very important, even in, for example, like post-war conflict societies where reconciliation committees are created. Like the ability to know what happened to you, to have that information is something that we generally value as a society, and it should be taken into account in this debate. So thank you very much.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister, and I'm happy to call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Am I audible like this, or do I need to move the mic closer to my mouth?
The sound is slightly fuzzy, like cutting off.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Wonderful. 1 second, please.
Of course.
Okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Okay, panel. We think ultimately this debate is about a very small subset of all the possible stolen children in this debate, to the extent that opening government tells us for 14 minutes that everyone in the relationship, both the parents and the children, would profit from knowing each other, and that they give us no reason why either the parents or the children are irrational in that affair and actually don't realize that they wouldn't know that. We think that, like, if we just make this policy voluntary, all these people would still consent. Like, we're completely fine with, like, making, like, a mandatory blurb at every, like, doctor's visit that the doctor tells you, like, oh, look, you can be tested for that, can make an advertisement campaign, but we want to make it 100% voluntary. This is specifically because we think that there is a crucial subset of all of children that do not want this and do not benefit from this, and that they would, that a disproportionate harm would be inflicted upon them. So here, also an important answer to the POI from CG, where they tell us that our case assumes that a lot of these children exist. This isn't necessarily true. What we assume is either that there is more of the children who don't want to be tested for legitimate reasons than children who are irrationally wrong about not being tested but would actually benefit from being tested. And even that isn't necessarily true, because we think that ultimately, if you would benefit to some extent from being tested, but you may not want it, the benefit is relatively small, since we think if you have, like, a deep burning desire for knowing your parents, then ultimately you'd probably do it on a voluntary basis. Whereas if you genuinely do not want to be tested and you would incur psychological damage from it, this damage is way greater. So even if this number is smaller, we think we still win that comparative. Okay, let's quickly engage with one principle that we hear out of opening government, where they tell us is, oh, look, in society, we're fine with actually forcing people to do certain things for a broader benefit, aka like conscription or mandatory vaccination. And we have two answers for this. Firstly, we say that the stolen children in particular don't incur specific duties towards either the state or their parents, because A, the state has mostly fucked them over at every possible turn. We think they are so disadvantaged by the state, and they have been deprived of so many rights that the state cannot have similar ethical duties towards them, because the state hasn't provided them with any of the normal benefits that the state provides its normal citizens, since the state has literally deprived them of their families. I'll engage with the duty towards parents in a second. But secondly, this argument is contingent on proving that this would actually have a social benefit. To the extent that this doesn't have a social benefit, because it just reinforces pre-existing trauma and makes people's lives worse, this also doesn't work. Okay, cool. So then let's talk about why some children just don't want this kind of interaction and why that is completely legitimate. We think there's like three main reasons. We think A, it is just you might be in certain life circumstances or surroundings where like it being revealed that you are a stolen child, and it may be really hard to genuinely keep that information secret, since these secrets can easily get out, can be difficult. Maybe you move in sort of like conservative circles in Argentina that have some affection for the military junta, or you're like a member of the military, and it would be really bad if other people found out that your like true parents were subversive, and this might then have like a direct personal risk towards you because you become a political target. We think secondly, and this is very important, people just have deeply personal reactions to trauma, like growing out without clear parents, maybe in abusive surroundings, within like a military environment full of like a lot of awful toxic masculinity. And we think it is simply like the state is not in a position where they can accurately tell what your personal response to this trauma was, and therefore whether it is correct to force you to like contact your parents in some way. We think like a lot of people, and like not a lot, like some people respond to trauma by simply putting that part of their life behind them and not wanting to interact with it at all, both parents and children. We think this can be completely legitimate and not something where the state has genuine information where they can falsify this preference of yours and say, we actually know better than you. And I think lastly, we just think it may cause you to rethink large parts of your identity. Some people may have developed a lot of like psychological defense mechanisms around surrounding alternative like narratives, personal narratives of their own identity, of their own parents, of their own history. If you force them to reconsider all the things that they thought were themselves, this may again be hugely traumatizing and very difficult. And it is your right as a person to not engage with that. You don't have to do that. Okay, now, on balance, we think that even if all of that wasn't true, and like this is just a matter of like who deserves it more, the parent or the child, we think that we ultimately should value children's rights in this matter a lot more than parents' rights. So this is independent from a utilitarian calculus. This is A, because the children have the least power in this relationship and neither moral duties towards the state nor the parents. I already explained the state part. Let's quickly go over the parents part. We think A, that the children didn't consent to being born. So the parents don't have like principal moral claims to this, but now government could say, oh, but like parents do a lot for their children. So as a result, this then engenders a certain amount of moral duty. And before I explain that, I'll take closing government.
So imagine that I cheat on my wife and I get a child with my mistress. And then my wife wants her genes so she can prove that I actually cheated and got a child with her. And every jurisdiction in the world, the child needs to give up her DNA. Why is this different?
Well, okay, look, we think in that case, the child wouldn't experience the same kind of awful trauma. But if that would be the case, like we don't have a strong opinion on this case. Like I really don't care about that. Okay, so we don't think that you have a strong duty towards your parents, because if you were separated from your parents closely after birth, they didn't do a oh, am I back? Okay, we think that secondly, okay, yeah, we think secondly that we accept children's right to disassociate from their parents in other cases, like when they've sort of abusive or religious parents. We think it's unproblematic that children don't want contact with them and don't want to be contacted by them. We think thirdly, the children simply haven't done any harm to anyone, and therefore the state is not correct in forcing them to do something. The state should pay reparations to parents in some way for hurting the parents, but the children haven't hurt the parents, so the children aren't the ones that should pay the cost. Lastly, I want to be clear that we think ultimately children are the best actors to judge their personal psychological reactions to this event, and as a result should be the ones that make this decision. At the end of the debate, we think that most people who would benefit from this would do it voluntarily. Some people are going to have strong reactions and are going to suffer. Please don't make them. Please.
I thank the member of government and happy to call upon the member of opposition.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So just a second. Three, two, one. 3 points in CO. 1. how this is harming the child by making him destroy relationships with his closest environment. 2, why it harms the parent by forcing them into bad interactions with the child that do not want to be contacted but get contacted anyway. 3, why the child anyway is more important than the parent. 2 points of rebuttal. 1, closure to the parent. If the parent is so important, we don't understand why they just force them to, to take the test. Why don't you force them to give them a call, go visit them? The extent of their logic that if the parent has such a right for closure, it's very strange that they only give them like the ability to make the child go the test. It's very strange that this logic is derived from the motion. But secondly, we need to understand that the specific kids that don't want to be tested have a reason for that, which will be in the analysis. So if we prove to you that it's harming the parents as well, so on their own metric will win. About CG, the analogy to minimum wage. In minimum wage and all of that, you do increase agency, but here you decrease agency because you need to show us that in the vast majority of cases, the likelihood is that it's going to improve the kid's life, but you're not engaging in any kind of analysis or comparative analysis of how it destroys relationships, and that's why you will lose. Secondly, in any case, regarding the fact that you need information for the parent, we say that in many cases, they already know their child was being stolen. They don't know the identity of the child. Therefore, you can still compensate them. But more than that, most parents, and this was in 1970 something, are 70, 80 years old. Many of them are dead. Many of them are very old. What kind of compensation you can do for them is very minimal. It's not a big delta in this debate. Let's get to the constructive, how it harms the child. OO tells you about trauma. This is a very small subset of cases. This is not the vast majority of cases. Let's get concrete about what is actually in the debate. These kids are 40 plus years old. They already have parents that they know. They think they're their parent. They have brothers. They have a family. They have connections. Notice that they were already lied to when they were young, because either they were told that they're their real parents, or they were just denied this information. If they're already suspected, that means that this kid was most likely already knows that he's suspected. These things are the exact things that the media is pumping. They say this geography has a high percentage of suspects. They give all kinds of parameters that the kid can be exposed to. That means that in a very high likely scenario, most of the kids already have some understanding that they're being suspected. So they have been lied for twice in their childhood and when they're adults, because they re-asked them. What does that mean? It's crucial to understand the characterization of these kids, why they're not going to get this type of test. 3 reasons. Either they're too weak mentally because they're not able to confront the information, just like when people don't want to know when they're dying, etc., because they don't have the ability to deal with the emotional distrust of finding out that your parents lied to you your whole life. And 2, because they don't care about their parents. They don't care to insert somebody who is like 80 years old into their life because it doesn't matter to them. And they make the comparative and they say, it's not for me. So these specific things, how this harms the kids. A, it breaks trust with parents. Once you found out that they lied to you twice in your life, that your whole life, 40 years old, for a lie, that you were adopted, that you're not a real child, it breaks trust. You don't know what else they lied to you. You don't know what else your brother lied to you, your grandma, your grandfather. It creates that's one, ruins the relationship. More likely that you will leave them, more likely that you will not be able to cooperate with them, more likely that your relationship will be damaged. 2, emotional hollowness. This creates you a deep emotional pain because you were lied to, because you don't know who you are anymore and what was your history, because your identity, part of your life story, has been shattered, and now you need to rediscover who you are. These are things that especially harm people that do not have the capacity. Maybe some people can handle that. These people do not go and find this information exactly because that. But secondly, how it harms the parent. Notice, even if they will find out this information and the kid would make the test, the parent would call them, and in many cases, these kids will not answer. Why? Because they don't care about the parent, because they were just shocked, because they went with trauma, because they just had a fight with their parents, so they don't want to be contacted by somebody who was their original child. So these parents will be very harmed by that and very much deeply affected. But secondly, even if they will contact the child, this child doesn't want to be contacted in the most vast majority of cases. This child is likely to say to the parent, because you and they are not idiots, they can make the distinction, the understanding that they were forced to go to this type of test because this parent was selfish. They will tell them that you are selfish because of your selfish reason to know who your child is after like 50 years when you're 80 years old and you're almost dead. It's crucial that you force them to destroy relationships and to create emotional hollowness. This makes the kid just go out to the parent and blame them, and it's harming the parent. But thirdly, about like why the parents are, why they're going to be, why the damage is so hard, because this is the comparative between the kid and the parents. like more than what OO gives you, there's the length of impact, okay? Not knowing what happened with your child after 50 years is annoying, but this is just an discomfort. People after 50 years losing their loved one, go get over that. But moreover, for the kid is not just a discomfort. For the kid is an active process of ruining a relationship with his most close and dear ones. For the kid, this is an actual damage and not a discomfort compared to the parent. So on the comparative, I mean, just losing the relationships with your beloved ones, I mean, getting into depression or hollowness, being so hurt by that, and you compare that to the damage that so-called the parent is going through. This is not comparative whatsoever. So just on the amount of the amount of impact, this is likely, I mean, for the amount of impact, the length of impact, you should prioritize the kid, not just because of consent, because this is, I mean, a wash, but because of the length of impact. Before I continue, I'll take OG.
The only comparative that we bring you in this debate is that the right to be a parent from the parent was taken, but the child always had the option to create a family with himself. This is why
Thank you. We're saying that you're taking the child's ability to shape his life, and this is one. But B, this is a length of impact, because we don't care that, I mean, the parent obviously, I mean, he did not choose for his child to be taken away, but the child was not, he did not choose this life anyway. The parent is 80 years old. That means they already have, and this is like leading me to the other comparative, they have a family, they have new kids, they already have a new life. You need to understand, nobody in this debate talks about demotion. It's 1974. These parents, I mean, were born in the 40s or 50s. They are close to death. Most of them, and this is crucial, are already dead, either because the junta killed them or because they were just too old, because life expectancy in Argentina is not 85. That means in the vast majority of cases, you're forcing kids to ruin their lives for parents that are either dead or do not want or are not getting any meaningful benefit. So when you make the comparison, eventually you get more harm to the kid, because eventually his livelihood and his relationship are being harmed. The parents, in the specific cases that the kid doesn't want to be contacted, in any way would not get a good interaction or closure, and the comparative clearly favors the child. Please oppose the motion.
Remember to call upon the opposition whip.
Just a second. Am I audible? Am I seeable? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Panel, the entire debate promises to weigh between the parents and the children. The problem is, apart from David, no one actually does. Because we agree that both governments show you some benefit to the parents, and we agree that the OO show you some harm to the child, but no one actually does this comparison to a degree that show us who of them we should prioritize. David does two important things. One, it shows you what is the actual damage that happened to the children, and why it is more important than a hidden trauma that OO gives us. And second of all, it gives you mechanisms why we need to prioritize them over the parents. Before I go to my clashes, 2 points of rebuttal. One, this wide societal issue that CG gives you basically is based upon the premise that most of the people don't want to be tested. This is something that we simply don't agree in this debate, considering the entire analysis, why it's so beneficial to both sides to do it. Therefore, if most of the children in this debate actually do get tested, then we don't have stigma against them, we don't have a collective action problem against them, and there is no problem. Oh, sorry, can you hear me? Yes, and therefore, there is no problem of knowing the scopes. Second of all, they try to analyze irrationality and give analogies of minimum wage. But panel, showing us potential cost and without showing potential risks simply doesn't prove lack of rationality. The fact that I have things to gain and the fact that I have certain things to lose does not show you that I, as an actor, unable to distinguish between the two of them and know the simple reality of my life and make this decision. We think that the fact that CG gives us reasons such as pressure and things like this to not go the test are not irrationality, but good reasons why I shouldn't do it, and they never show you why I should deprioritize my like very clear interest to not do it, and because they think that Royal, can you stop writing the chat? Thank you. So we think that they don't do it. So let's go to my substantive. First of all, why we think that David gives you the actual impact on the actual damage to the child. Because OO gives you two mechanisms. One, you might be in a specific place like in the military and there's going to be a stigma against you. And two, it's a very bad trauma to relive these kind of things. But David gives you a much more important and nuanced analysis. He say to you, look, most of these children are probably suspecting something because people told them you are a suspect. They probably have done a conversation with their parents in which their parents told you, well, no, they probably told them, no, you're not adopted, you're real parents, you weren't kidnapped, okay? This is important because this is where David's analysis tells you, this is a actual destruction of the relationship, because now you're forcing the child to know something that he did not want to know, and you forcing him to discover that the entire surrounding people had lied to him for 40 years. His parents, his grandparents, his brothers, I mean, all the people around him continually lied to them. He probably have kids of his own that now need to be distanced from their grandparents. He probably have a lot of like other people in his surrounding that has sustained this lie for a long period of time. So we think that this is a critical damage to this child. We think that this, so first of all, we say it's a destruction of the relationship. Now, the answer of CG here is pretty weird because they say, well, it's probably mean that the relationship was very damaged to begin with, so there is no reason to sustain. Well, who are you to decide? I mean, there are relationships that are based upon small lies. I mean, there are married couples that one of them committed a betrayal against the other one, and both of them prefer not to know it and sustain the relationship because there are other major benefits to the relationship. And CG are in no position to say that a relationship that has some suspicion inside of it is a bad relationship that we should just throw from the window, assuming that the child actually do want to maintain it because he have the information and the suspect already. Okay. Second of all, David gives you the analysis to show you it actually like make me to reconsider my entire life story. I mean, it's not, it's who I am, how I was raised, what are the values that I was given, how do I portray the story of my life and my identity. This is critical. Like you take 40 years of my life and you show me that a fundamental aspect that I believed was different is now different. Notice that no government is answering to this rationale, which is pretty weird. I mean, understand that this is something that is a major damage to someone who did not want to know this information. Let's go to the comparative. Before that, I'll take CG.
So I literally POI'd the DLO and asked him, so just to be sure, a right number of people doesn't want to be tested, right? And he said yes. And now you tell us it's a small number.
Okay, thank you. The DLO probably didn't understand the question. He answered yes, and then his DLO just spent 2 minutes show you why it's wrong. I'll let the panel to decide, but the kind of thing that OO stands is that most of the people would do this test because they spend a lot of time to tell you exactly that explicitly. Okay, let's go to the comparison with the parents, because CG starts the framing with promising us this comparison, but notice they never do, because all they say there are analogies in which you force the child to go through things, but they never show you why this specific case is the same. David gives you a lot of the analysis. One, we say many of the parents are very old or dead. Okay, I mean, I love the fact that CG's parents are alive, but they probably weren't live as people who actively against the junta in Argentina 40 years ago. Okay, this is not a very good particular known quality to maintain a long lifespan if you're trying to like throw the junta to a degree that they actually take your kids away. We think that it's very likely that many of them are not alive at this point. Second of all, we say that most of the damage to the parents is unfortunately already happened. I mean, they already lost their child. They're already very sad. Most of their lifespan was very, very bad. The ability for us to recover their loss is very tiny compared to the fact that we're taking a child life that was not ruining it and ruin it for some marginal benefit of maybe more closure to the parents. Okay, And lastly, we say in most of the cases in which the child does not want this kind of relationship, the closure would be bad because now the parents just know that the child don't want to see him. If for all those reasons, please oppose.
I thank the opposition whip and would like to again congratulate all speakers for an excellent debate. I now invite